Hello, hello. So today we're going to talk about something that scares a lot of us, which is public speaking, speaking to others. And we're going to have a very special guest who will give us some special tips first to overcome that fear, and second, and truly important, how to be remembered. So stay tuned because we'll be back really soon. So, hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hope you're feeling fine. Please let us know where you are, for where you talking, and engage with the conversation. So today we're gonna have a special guest who loves golden fish.
All
Stan
things
Phelps.
goldfish.
So I'm gonna bring him to the screen. Let me bring. Okay. Oh no, I'm messing this. Okay, here you are. Hello, Stan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be with you, Marco.
Oh, perfect. So, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure. I have something to confess to you, Stan. I don't know how you can do it because you're so active on LinkedIn and you're doing posting, commenting. Oh my God, I don't know how you can do it. How you can manage. You should have a lot of energy. And while you're doing this, you're writing like hell. Oh my God, it's amazing. So thank you for being here. It's a pleasure. It's an honor, and I think it's really important to talk about this public speaking. So thank you. I will ask you please to introduce yourself, and then let's go to the conversation, if you don't mind. Okay?
Sure. So Stan Phelps, author of the Goldfish series of books. My work, I write for Forbes. I've been a TEDx speaker, adjunct professor. I talk about and write about the future of the customer experience, the employee experience, and the brand experience. And over the last 8 years, I've been fortunate enough to speak in 16 different countries on hundreds of stages. And I've really become a student of the art of presenting and communication, so much so that back in May, I launched the Silver Goldfish, which is focused on how do you deliver a memorable presentation.
Absolutely. It's for me. It's crucial because, as you say in the book, it's amazing. I think it's the number one fear of above
It
it
is.
all.
So the number one fear for people when they survey, about 74% of people say that they fear speaking as their greatest fear. It's actually called glossophobia. And the irony is that the second biggest fear is dying. So comedian Jerry Seinfeld makes a very big joke about this. He says, that means if you go to a funeral, that more people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So it doesn't make any sense.
So I have to ask you this, Stan, because I think you love the public speaking job. I think I also do. And how are you dealing with that? Because I think last 2 months at least you're not doing that, and I know the thrilling of speak to the people. I for me it puts my blood boiling. How are
Right.
you managing that?
So since the middle of March, I haven't gotten on a stage. This has been my stage to kind of give you a little bit of a tour of the office here. But all of my presentations have been virtual since the middle of March. And I'm actually presenting more. I'm just not getting on a plane to do it.
It's well, I was about to say it's not so tiring, but it's not like that, right?
No, it is. It surprisingly takes a lot of energy and engagement when you're presenting to something this big and you're not getting that feedback from the audience. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of presenting, especially in a virtual setting, is you're not getting that communal feel of being in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we have Ryan. Hello, Ryan. Please let us know, engage with the conversation. So let's go to the basics, because for me, it's truly in the importance is improving every day of being confident in public speaking, to sell your ideas, to sell you as a worker, everything. I think it's
Right.
truly important, and people avoid like going to hell this, which because I think it's a need. Sooner or later, you have to do it. You can run away. You can run, but you can hide. Which
I'll share. This is really cool. This is a quote by Warren Buffett. Do you know Warren Buffett? So amazing. He says, one of the things that you want to be sure to do, whether you like it or not, is to get comfortable with public speaking. He says that's an asset that will last you 50 or 60 years. It's a necessary skill.
absolutely.
And that's one of the most, right there is one of the most successful business people of all time. Here's the thing, even if we're not in sales, everyone is making presentations each and every day.
Absolutely.
Whether it's kind of coaxing, talking to your kids or working with your colleagues in a work scenario, we have to get comfortable at presenting. And the challenge is that no one is born a good speaker or a presenter. And so that's actually a blessing, because it's something that we can learn, Marco. And to your point, there are little things that we can do to raise the level of our presentations.
Absolutely. I must confess this, because I think my DNA, it's a shy DNA, and I have to overcome this. I remember I was on high school. I had to present a work in the psychology discipline, and it took me so many times. It was amazing.
So many times to get it right. Yeah.
Yeah, and to make it, I was presenting, I was reading what I
Right.
did, and then I start to get rid of that shyness,
Right.
and do you have any tips how you can start? Okay, let's face the bull, like we say here in the south of Europe.
So one of the biggest tips that I recommend is that so many times when we get up to speak, we think that we have to memorize everything, which is not true. If we try to do that, we're so much in our head that we're not connecting with the audience. And so one of the biggest tips that we talk about in the book is this concept of stop. And when I say stop, I don't mean literally stop presenting and communicating. STOP is an acronym for single thought to one person. And how that tip works is that you look at somebody in your meeting or in your audience and you deliver a single thought to that one person. Now, you cannot speak again till you engage someone else in the audience, and then you deliver a single thought. And you continue going on there. And when the great thing that allows you is an opportunity to kind of slow down and for your audience to kind of take in what you've just said, like absorb it. It also gives you a chance to breathe, which is really good for your brain. And then lastly, it not only are you now maintaining eye contact with everyone in the room? Because you're taking that little pause, you're not saying what we would call here in the States filler words. You're not saying and so. Do you have a particular word that you use, Marco?
Maybe the maybe
Maybe the
yeah.
So this simple thing of single thought to one person allows you to kind of stay in the moment. It also allows you not to have to be thinking about the next thing you want to say while you're saying the current thing. So it's like magic.
Absolutely, because one thing I make, not now, I stop because I'm overwhelmed with things and I want to focus on my work. But I made for a while, for some years, theater.
Okay.
And one thing I learned by doing is and this problem we have when we have to say lots of things, and because we have to memorize
Right.
it. And one mistake we make often is, okay, let's do it fast so we get through it and it's finished. And what it happens, it's the opposite of what we want, because
Right.
we start, we don't breathe, we start the words start it's amazing, it totally mess.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's that's the challenge. Is most people think the goal of doing a presentation is like just finishing the presentation. That's not the goal. The goal is you've only been successful if you've delivered a central message that people can remember. So we talk about this idea in the book that the goal is to come across two ways. You want to come across loud and you want to come across clear, loud and clear. And that's where most people, unfortunately, for the loud is not your voice. The loud is the ability to engage the audience and rise above distraction. And the clarity is, how do you kind of organize your message in a way that it becomes sticky and memorable for people? And that's what that's really what my co-author Alan Hoffler and I really tried to tackle in the book, is this idea of being 5 by 5, which is military speak for loud and clear.
Yeah, and it is truly important, because by these days we have this small attention grabber, which we are fighting against them, of course. And as I used to say, I also do trainings, and some of my colleagues say, "Oh no, I ban absolutely the mobile phones and everything." And I say, no, for me, it's the challenge. I'm fighting to grab the attention of my trainees.
Right.
And because if we can't do that, this is because we're not doing it so well.
Right. Right. We say in the book, you can't lose attention that you never had in the first place. Right. And here's the thing, it used to be when you're up on stage, you're competing against this, right? Well, think about it when we're presenting virtually now. I have about 15 other tabs open other than this one right now, right? Plus I've got this, plus I have food I'm thinking about potentially in the refrigerator. I've got maybe kids and family that I have to deal with. I mean, the amount of distractions now, we have to be so good when we present to rise above that. That's where the bar is now.
Absolutely, because for instance, we have so many things just around our hands. It's easy to get over it. So one thing is the preparation, to be confident, because we have a message to deliver. Which
right.
Tips do you think could be very useful and good to put in the field really fast. So, okay, let me out instead of memorize everything because it's another
Right.
mistake. Okay, how to get the ideas, topics?
Right. First off, is that there's a great. Do you know this movie City Slickers?
No,
It's
but I should.
a movie with Billy Crystal, comedian Billy Crystal, and he's on a horse and he's traveling on this cattle drive in like Wyoming, and this old cowboy is going to tell him the secret of life, and Billy Crystal is going to, he's all excited. What's the secret? And he lifts his finger like this and he says, "One thing." And that's, if I would give anybody the biggest tip, is sometimes when we present, we try to throw everything at it. And we're not focusing on the one thing that we want, the central idea that we want people to walk away or to do as a result of that presentation. The second tip I would give is that if you're going to organize your content, I would never try to do 10 things because people are not going to remember 10 things. 3 is how we remember things. So you want to group stuff in groups of 3 if you want it to be memorable. But nailing that one thing and knowing what your one thing is would help people dramatically, because then you would build the entire presentation around it.
Yeah, because the really end is to make some difference in the others and give them. I think it's more than teaching; it's to inspiring and to make them make things.
Right. What do you want them to do as a result? How do you share your information in a way that they can relate to the material, and then also see what they need to do as a result? That's kind of the biggest challenge of presenting.
Yeah, because sometimes we may felt in that temptation of looking shine and okay, she's a he's a genius. Okay, and that's not the point because, and I think I need to work on that. It's how to deliver that shortcut that you need to implementation.
Right. Right. Well, we also talk about in the book, I think what so many people do is if they have 100% of time to work on their presentation, I would say if most people are being honest, they probably spend about 80% of the time putting the PowerPoint together, right? And maybe they spend 10% of their time thinking about how to organize things, and maybe they practice or rehearse. And so what we talk about in the book is, even if you have a short compressed time for a presentation, the first third should be analog, sketching out how to organize the presentation. What are you going to open with? How are you going to share the main points? How are you going to close? What's the call to action, right? How are you going to keep it engaging during the presentation? That's a third of your time. The middle third is, it could be slides. It could be a whiteboard that you're going to use. It could be, this is my favorite prop here.
For the last time, no.
It could be a prop that you use, or it could be slides or Prezi or whatever you use. But that's the middle time. And then the time I think most people discount is how important it is to practice and rehearse your content. And most people just think practice and rehearsal are the same. Practice is about maybe doing small sections of your talk and maybe doing them multiple times so you feel comfortable. Rehearsal is when you do it from beginning to end. And they both have a place, but they're different.
Absolutely. Well, we have some comments here. Olá, Fernando, bem-vindo. Danielle says, what should I do in practice with your insights? Yes, I think it is the point. Stan, you nailed something there, which for me it's truly important. And I think a huge amount of people start messing right there. Intro. For instance, okay,
Right.
sorry. For instance, look, my example. I don't do it because I know we should not. Sorry, I'm Portuguese. My English is not so good. So please, I'm so sorry. I think when you start your conversation asking for sorry because you were sick, because you have some, you came running, it's the beginning of the ruin.
Right. Right. You're gonna lose the audience. You want to make sure that we talk about in the book, you want to really think about what your first 6 words are. And ideally, we say in the book, you ideally want to open up with a story because that's how people remember, but that's also how we stay engaged as human beings. So a comedian will do this. They start with their second best story. What do they end with, Marco?
With the best one.
With the best one, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you should think about it, right? Grab their attention right from the beginning, give them a reason to lean in and want to be able to listen. Don't introduce yourself. Let somebody introduce you before you come up. Don't make excuses. Don't say you're sorry and apologize. Don't read your bio, right? People, if you're up on stage, there's a reason, or you're leading that part of the meeting and presenting, there's a reason why you're there. Don't waste that time. Get right to it.
Absolutely. Well, we have here a really nice question. Obrigado, Fernando. Fernando asks, and improvising it's a nice question. Improvising is not an option.
Well, there comes time in when everyone is presenting that you have to improvise, and that can be as simple as something happens in the room that you didn't plan, right? And now you have a choice. You either have to. We talk about in the book. You've got 4 options when something happens. One, you can forget it, right, and hope that it goes away. Two, you can stop and fix whatever the problem is, right? And hopefully you correct it and you move forward. 3 is that you can improvise, right? And use that as part of the presentation. And comedians are tremendous at that, right? They can take somebody who is a heckler or somebody yells something out, and they have a way of just weaving it in to the presentation. We say if you can't fix it or forget it is not an option and you can't feature it, then the 4th F is find someone to blame. Our American president is very good adept at this. He is a masterful find someone to blame guy.
Usually here in Portugal, we are professionals on that. It's always the problem of the government, the neighbor, always someone else playing.
Right.
So, hello, Marcelo. Welcome. There's this, and you remind me about those mistakes, and one is made so often. It's when people turn the back to the public and start reading the PowerPoints. And you mentioned that on the book because I used to say on my training, well, I won't read the PowerPoint because I'm almost sure that you know reading.
Right. And here's the challenge. We read about 3 times as fast as people can talk. So I've already read what's on that PowerPoint before you can say it. And then as you're saying that, I've gone somewhere else. And so one of the things we talk about in the book is obviously don't read from the slides. The slides shouldn't be a crutch for you knowing your own material. Also, don't use bullet points, right? We joke in the book, guns don't kill presentations, bullets do. and so if you're sometimes you're forced to have to bring a list in, at least bring them in one at a time and never use like full sentences. Just enough that it can allow you to be able to fill in the details and tell the story.
Yeah, I think that's the temptation of, let me put this, because one thing, people sometimes, I have this problem. Sometimes I get lost and I start, my head goes around, and I get lost. So this importance of being objective and straight to the
Right.
point. And sometimes that's, I think that's why people put so many text on PowerPoints. Okay, it's more safe for me. Any hack on that?
Right. Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, I think what sometimes people try to use the PowerPoint for two purposes. Sometimes they know that the PowerPoint is going to be given out to whoever's in the meeting or at the conference afterwards. Mm-hmm. So because they know that, they treat it as what we call a slide you meant. Right? It's a doc. It really should be a PDF, just a document, but it's been recreated in slides. And so that's the challenge. I think we'd be much better served if we knew that was something was going to have to get handed out, that we created a different handout that could be given out after the presentation. Ideally, I think it's not good to hand it out before, because people will just, flip through it, right? So it's ideally you just use images. If you have to use some words, that's okay, but not full sentences, and ideally not bullets. Yeah.
Absolutely, because I'm gonna work on that, because I think I already made this photo and a sentence on the top or in the middle of the image, and I think it's, and because this kind of presentation with so many text and bullets and everything kills one of the things which is truly important by these days, which is storytelling.
Right. Well, I don't want to ever come across that I am minimizing how important visuals are, because we talk about this idea in the book, Marco, that if I just tell you something that's important and you just hear it, right? A week from now, if I asked you what you remembered, on average, you would only just remember 10%. But here's the thing: if you hear me say it and there's like a really good visual behind it, now I see it as well. It's called dual coding, where you're seeing and you're hearing. What do you think? What percentage do people remember a week later if they've had a good image and they've heard something that's memorable?
50?
What is that? A little more than that, 65%. That's a 550% increase in memorability, right? So I tell people, you don't have to use great images, right? If it's not important for people to remember what you said. So I'm a big proponent of using great images when you speak. This is a really quick, couple quick tips here. This is a tip that people use for photographers. When you're putting an image on there, much like when you're taking a picture and you look through and see the kind of the tic-tac-toe, you want to put the emphasis of either your text or the image where the lines intersect. It's what's called the power points, these 4 points. And so here's another just handful of tips. One, use great images. Don't use bullets. We've talked about that. Limit the amount of text that you put on the slide. Use the PowerPoints. And lastly, don't use the default fonts that when you open up PowerPoint. That's not going to serve you all that well. But I'm a big proponent of using great images. There are a lot of great places where you can get free or low-cost images, and there's no excuse not to.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna back to the fonts in a minute. Temo, hola Temo, ¿qué tal? He says, I create a simple presentation, then sent a different doc PDF with more details, like you said.
Awesome, like Ryan. That's brilliant. That's the way it should be done. And unfortunately, a lot of people try to have the handout and the slides be the same thing, and it doesn't work.
Absolutely.
It doesn't work for either.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan says, I used to do presentations with slides. My last few presentations I did without slides. It was freeing.
It was freeing. Yeah. Here's the thing. This is not an example of it, but I always will have in my pocket almost like a band would do a set list for what I'm going to be talking about, because you never know, even if you're using slides, your slides might go out. You might have a technical problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So you want to make sure that it's okay to have notes as long as you're not constantly reading them or referring to them. But it's absolutely great if you want to make sure that you're staying on track and have a backup. So, Ryan, I think that's perfectly fine. A lot of people, I think that's a trend that I think we'll see continue going forward, not being so dependent upon a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I remember in October I made a workshop. Well, the last workshops I made, no PowerPoints at all. I just write down the topics.
Right.
Whiteboard, flip chart, and for me it's amazing. If you give me a whiteboard and a flip chart,
you're off to the races.
Absolutely, because I like to. Here in Portugal, we have an expression who says, "Do you understand, or do you want me to draw something?"
Okay, gotcha.
And I like to draw, even though I make the draws of 5 years old boy.
Here's the thing, which I think is such an important takeaway. We write about it in the book. Is presenting is not about perfection, right? It's about connection. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that you draw horribly, Marco, because it's not just about conveying information. It's also about conveying feeling. And I can imagine you get pretty animated, even though you don't draw it so well, right? That you're getting animated when you're drawing, and people are feeling that.
Absolutely.
And that's what you want when you present.
Absolutely. Let's get back to that thing you mentioned before. And for me, I think it's one of the challenges, which is fonts, because some of them are too fancy,
right?
Hard to read, too small. Your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, I think first off, most people just make the mistake of using the default font, which on PowerPoint, I think it's Calibri. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think it's maybe Avenir on Keynote, the Apple product. But I do think it's important to spend a little time to try to pick a primary font and a secondary font, and try to get something that meshes with your overarching brand. And there's such a great quote I love, Marco, and it applies to fonts, right? It's from a movie called Spinal Tap. Do you know this movie?
Not really.
So it's a rock mockumentary, and the lead singer has this great quote. He says, sometimes there's such a fine line between clever and stupid. And so you want a font that works well and can be clever, but you don't want to go over the line where it's, to your point, hard to read, or it looks like it's too overdone. But even if you just pick a font that fits you, and then make sure, we talked about limiting the amount of words on a slide, make sure that you use big fonts when you do put words on the slide. And one of the rules we talk about is, the size of your font should be at take the oldest person that's in the room, divide their age by half, and that's your minimum font size. That's a great rule from a guy named Guy Kawasaki. Yeah, but it makes sense, right? If you've got somebody who's 65 years old in the room, you can't have a font that's smaller than 33 font. And the great thing is that there are a lot of free fonts out there. Even Microsoft and Apple have a ton of great fonts that you can pick from. Pick one that works with you.
Really good. Number, I don't know, but I think it's on the top of the ranking consternations. The hands. Where should I put my hands? My God, I don't know. On the pocket, being like he. Oh my God, what should I do?
Right. One of my friends does some speech training, and they say when people hold their hands like this, do you know, like this, and they hold it down by their waist, that's technically called the vagesture. So here's the thing. I think it's very comfortable just to have your hands down by your sides. And the main thing is we want to be able to communicate with our hands. But the problem is if we keep them up the entire time and we're doing the same thing that means the same thing each and every time, it's not going to be effective. So simply the art of kind of resetting. And when you make a gesture and you're communicating something relating to your head or a far distance or something that's small, use your hands and get them up. Don't be afraid to, let the elbows fly a little bit. One of the things we have to realize is that when we're speaking, and we talk about this in the book, and you're conveying something with feeling, Marco, only 7% of what we convey are the words that we use. Right? So 55% of that is going to be our body language, and 38% is going to be the tone of our voice. So low or high or rapid. So understanding that gestures do communicate, and the main thing, again, just reset when you're not making a gesture. Just put your hands down by your side. It's going to feel awkward, but I don't like people that put their hands together like this. I think if you put your hands in your pocket, it can come across the wrong way. If you put your hands behind your back, it's weird. Yeah, does that help?
Absolutely. I think that's the. Oh, Fernando says that sometimes we want just to cut the arms off and that's it. And you mentioned something that it's really important: the voice, and okay, now I love to do this because I know that engage the people when I start speaking real low. And for instance, let me tell you a secret. And it's something really obvious. It's not a secret at all. But the fact that you just grab their attention because you're lowering
Right.
your voice, uh, and people, I think, often don't do this because one thing, maybe it's my perception, we are so afraid of judgments that we lose these salty things which bring so many color to our presentations.
Right. So the reason why people fear speaking and presenting is because the same part of our brain that judges threats, right? And it's very important, like threats to our life. It's important that we know when there's an actual threat to our life. Well, that part of our brain also sees threats to our identity. And it can't tell the difference between this is my life or this is my identity. And so that's the challenge. We tend to go much smaller than if we were just normally animated. And the interesting thing is people can't, here's the thing. We talk about it in the book. Mark Twain once said this. There are only two types of speakers: the nervous and those that are liars. Right? So everyone is nervous when they present. But here's the thing. People can't see that you're nervous. And that's the thing. Some people can get so caught up. Oh, that's why they start to sweat. Just feel, again, pace yourself and take your time, but use that nervousness, that energy to be able to project and be present in the moment.
Absolutely. Well, Temo, there is certain meaning to where you put your ends.
Say that again for me. Where do I put the end of a presentation, or?
There is certain meaning to where you put your hands. I think he means.
To your hands. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah, I'm sure there is. There's like in the book we have kind of the 8 different typical things, and here's the thing. If you're comfortable with one hand in your pocket when you present and you can be effective doing that, go for it. If you're most comfortable, doing your hands together like this or like this, go for it. I think that we have to understand that it is important to gesture. So it's good not to do anything that stops us from be able to be in the moment and to be as big as we potentially can be.
Absolutely. Well, this thing, okay, we talked about the beginning, about the middle, and the end, which is, as you said, the most important.
Right.
This thing that so many times it's forgotten, I think, which is the CTA.
The call to action, yeah.
Absolutely.
So you have to understand, what do you want as a result of that presentation? What do you want people to do next? And so in sales, there's always kind of a next action. For your colleagues, when you're in a work environment, maybe there's something that you want to happen next. Or if you're at a conference presentation, it may be a challenge to them to apply the material and to do something with it. But we have to remember that we tend to remember the first thing we hear, maybe some type of peak during the presentation, and we remember the last thing that we hear. So we want to make sure, just like I said, we practice the first 6 words of how we're going to open. We absolutely want to practice what is our call to action? How are we going to kind of land the plane, right, and finish in a way that's memorable?
Absolutely. I remember this one I made, I think 3 years ago. I was asked to talk on a logistics conference. And one of the problems, they said, "Oh, Marco, it's because marketing is a sexy thing, and logistics is not, because it's hidden. It's the kind of nobody sees work, and it's truly important." And
Right.
so I bring to the screen a small video of a gas company, Portuguese, about. How do we say that to burn in the oven? Oh my God, I forgot. Yes,
Burn in
also
the oven?
to cook.
Cook, yeah, okay, gotcha.
We made with
Bake.
a bottle to put gas inside, which is called pluma, which is more light. And they made ladies, beautiful ladies, sexy ladies with short dresses, bring it to the house of the people. And then I say, look, I show, okay, you don't believe that logistics is sexy? There you go.
Look at this. There you go.
And it was, whoa, it was amazing.
It worked, yeah?
Yeah. One thing, Stan, should we make this recap at the end of the takeaways from this presentation, or avoid this because
I think there is always an ability to kind of wrap a bow on what you've presented. So maybe there's a way. I always like to say in maybe a final story, Marco, where you can it's the thing that ties everything all together.
Yeah.
And kind of drives, it's that aha moment. So you want to tell a great story at the end, and then it's specific to say, all right, and this is what I want you to do next as a result of it. Some people will say, Marco, tell them what you're going to tell them, right? Then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And
it's too many tell.
No, it might work in the military, right, when you have a captive audience. But I think if you organize your talk correctly, you just do the three main points. You have the ability to tell a closing story at the end that kind of ties it all together. That's what you want to do.
Yeah, I think because one thing I used to do is to recap with bullets.
You used to. I love that. You're no longer going to do that. No, I do think though that what's probably more important, because again we're in the battle with this right here, right? And we're in a battle with now, especially in virtually, people opening up other tabs and just listening or shutting off their video. We have to make sure that we're switching things up. In person, it used to be every 8 to 10 minutes. But now I believe, in my opinion, with virtual, every 4 to 5 minutes, you have to have the audience doing something, right? Change the direction of if you're virtual, the camera. Tell another story. Ask a question to the audience, right? Maybe have them, do an exercise, put them in a breakout room, or play a video. But we have to almost use every little trick to make sure that we're switching it up, because how our brain works, if our brain just sees the same thing for 8 or 10 minutes, it will shut down. And so that is, I think, just a vital key as we as we go forward, that we need to be mindful of making sure that we're mixing it up to keep the attention of the audience.
Absolutely, absolutely, and because there's also that thing that you mentioned, and some people said to me, "Look, I usually see your videos as a podcast."
Okay.
So, but it is also important if because, for instance, one thing you can do with your video content is that later you can reuse it as a podcast. But the problem with just audio content is that you should put more energy on that.
Right. Right. Yeah. If it's just, again, it goes back to the ability to hear and see something, it's going to be that much more sticky. If it's just audio, you want to make sure that you're driving that. And good audio is absolutely key.
Yeah. Sometimes people just ask me, "Oh, about the webcam to go to the video." Oh, look, the most important is it's the audio, not the video, the
Not
image.
the video.
Because as we know, for instance, we can see a video which the image is not so good, but if the sound is creepy, okay, they will go away and start listening to another Shakira on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Which tips do you recommend for people who now needs to make more live video conferences, because it's not the same as you mentioned before? Which tips when people are preparing will you give for them to make a nice presentation?
Yeah. So one of the things we talk about in the book is kind of a six-step formula for how to be effective. So I think you want to, and the acronym that we use is SILVER, because the book is called the Silver Goldfish. So the first is you want to pay attention to how you start, right? So the beginning is absolutely key, making that great first impression, connecting with the audience. The second bit when you're preparing is how are you going to illustrate the presentation? For example, if you're delivering it virtually, I just did one earlier today. Could you create polls that engage people when you ask a question, which is always fun to see if they get the right answer and see how everybody did. But that illustrating is key. How do you put the visuals together? The L in silver is learning. So how do you make sure before you're giving the presentation that you're understanding the material, you're reviewing how you're going to lay it out, and practicing maybe your open and your close. And then the last three, which is the V, the E, and the R, the V is for vaulting. And again, this is how do you make sure that you get out to a great start, that you engage the audience. The E is the educating. So how do you share your main points? And then the R is how do you kind of land the plane? We call that requesting. And how do you wrap it all up together and make sure you're giving that strong call to action? So starting, illustrating, learning, vaulting, educating, and requesting are I think the 6 keys.
Really good. So for those of you who want to know more about the book, and it's a really good book, I'm reading it, I'm almost finishing. It's a really good book. There you go on the comments and on the footer, crawling down the book. Stan, can you tell a little about the book writing process? Because I'm curious about it.
Sure. So this is I've written now 15 books in the series. That doesn't count things like workbooks or mini books. So for me, the way that I do it is, for example, my co-author, Alan, we get together. The way I do it is create a project. In this case, it was called the Silver Goldfish Project. And we asked people to give us tips of how to create and deliver a memorable business presentation. So, Marco, we collected over 250 tips. Now, in the book, we didn't put all 250 in, but then we went through all 250 and we started to go, all right, that's a great example. We started to figure out, all right, which kind of patterns are we seeing? And then we took the best examples from each of those different types in the pattern. So for our book, it was 5 things that make you loud and 5 things that make you clear when you present. And so across those 10 things, we had 64 different tips that we shared in the book. Plus we laid out, this is kind of neat, we created these tools that you could use.
It's amazing. That matrix, it's amazing.
Thank you. I think if people just bought the book and got the tool to be able to, not only the matrix to give them tips, but the preparation guide.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Is really helpful. So yeah, it's, all of my books, and then when I organize the books and start to write them, Marco, they always fall into kind of 3. It's like a play in 3 parts. The first is the why. So why is it important to be a great presenter and communicator? Right? The biggest myth of communication is the illusion that it's actually taken place. Right? So the first part of the book is always the why. The second part of the book is the what. And that's right from the project, from all of those examples. It's, what did we find? What's the framework in the what part? And then the third major part of the book is always the how. So in this case, it was that silver formula. Here are the 6 steps that you need to do to deliver a memorable presentation. So why, what, and how. And 15 books in, I think I've got a pretty good handle on how to do it.
Yeah. That's one thing I want to do also in the future. So that's one of the reasons I like to invite book writers. It's to get those insights. So Stan, we are reaching the end, and one thing I usually ask to my guests is suggestions. One shout out, a professional that you recommend people to follow, a book, a tool, a habit, a movie, and a series.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm so demanding.
We'll do
Shame
it
on
fast.
me.
So I'm going to recommend my co-author. He's also my speaking coach. His name is Alan Hoffler, and he's got a group. It's called Millswick Communication. He does these great little minute-long podcasts, so that was good. All right, so that was an author. The book I would recommend, the book I recommend the most, and we talk about it in The Silver Goldfish, is a book by Chris Malone and Susan T. Fisk. It's called The Human Brand. The Human Brand. And it talks about the fact that 80% of how we view other people comes down to just 2 things: warmth and competence. And so it's important, especially when you get up to present, that you're projecting both warmth, that you have the right intent, and 2, that you can be competent when you communicate. What were the other things, Marco? I need to do a movie and a series.
A tool?
A tool. All right. So you definitely have to use, I'll go over here again. You definitely have to use the preparation grid for sure. And then check out the presentation matrix. that's going to give you tips on how to be loud and clear.
Yeah.
And then movie, maybe one of my favorite movies of all time. It's an old movie. I just rewatched it with my youngest son. It's called The Man Who Would Be King. Have you heard of this movie?
Well, there's one problem. When they translate the movies to Portuguese,
Different
sometimes
title.
the title doesn't resonate anything.
Right. So so that is a favorite movie. It's Sean Connery, Michael Caine. It was done back in the 1970s, but it's a classic. It's a short story by Rudyard Kipling that was made into a movie. And then my favorite series that I love, I'm watching it right now, is The West Wing. If you know this, it's all about the American presidency with a really good, honorable president that's in the show.
Okay, perfect. Stan, thanks a lot. It was an amazing conversation. Expectable, of course. I don't know if you want to send a last message for those who were watching us or seeing the replay.
No, other than I think, the blessing and the curse is that no one is born a great presenter. So my call to action is, this is like a muscle, right? You have to take the opportunities. You got to work at it. And if you put in the time, you can follow the steps that we outlined. This is the single biggest thing that you could do to raise your career and if you want to differentiate yourself. So I would highly recommend investing the time to become a great presenter.
Absolutely. So those who are watching us, please let us know, what do you think? Please send hearts, send likes to Stan.
Ryan, thanks for the shout out. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I was about to forget. How can people find you on the internet, Stan?
So you mentioned before, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of my writing. My personal website is stanphelpsspeaks.com. And you can find more about my keynotes and workshops and all of the different books in the Goldfish series there.
Okay, perfect. Beatriz, say thank.
Beatriz, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. So Stan, it was amazing. Thank you. Hope we can let me know when I will know for sure when the next book will come.
Yeah.
So you can join us again, because it was a really insightful conversation. Hope you keep doing this amazing job. A shout out also to LinkedIn, which is an amazing platform, because I had my ghost profile, and then when they give me the LinkedIn Live allowance, I came to LinkedIn as it should be, and I'm amazed with everything that is happening there. So Thank you. Wish you a good evening.
Yes.
And a nice week.
Marco.
And
you too.
We'll stay tuned. Bye-bye.
Bye.